So if you're really anything like me, then you've probably seen those Snowfall edits of Franklin Saint on TikTok. It's usually like the brick or like the bodies, like something like that. But as like kind of like a show, Snowfall really is kind of slept on. Today I'm not going to be like talking directly about the show. I'm going to really be digging into one of the singular characters I actually despise within the show. And not in a like I love to hate them type of way, but in a hate where it's like I genuinely hate them because they just ruin everything. Now, that character is going to be our protagonist, Franklin's auntie, which is going to be Louie Saint there. Now, the second Shorty gets on screen, you could tell something was off about her. Real talk. Like, especially since once business started coming out into the table in that first season, like even that man Jerome, like, hey, he knew to keep that stuff on the low, especially around his girl, knowing the type of person that she is. Now, with Jerome and Louie, they are boyfriend and girlfriend. And I'm not really going to, like, insult your intelligence by acting like you didn't, of course, know that already. But I kind of say that to show you kind of that he knows who he's dealing with. And, of course, like, one might ask, like, who is Jerome dealing with Louie? So, kind of to explain that, we got to go back to the start of Season 1, like, right before her introduction. She actually worked in the clubs as one of the working ladies. Now, off rip, that kind of tells you she is a hustler in her bones. She knows when to, feed this guy's ego for a little extra tip. She knows that type of stuff. She knows what cards to play in what moment. I mean, she's really intelligent and clever. She's clever enough to realize that when she saw Jerome, that he was a way for her to escape that lifestyle. And she then fully takes advantage and fully moves in with him. Now, I don't think that Louie was using Jerome by any means. Like, you could tell she had a real love for him. But in my opinion, if we're being like 100% real, if it wasn't Jerome's house she ended up in and that she was staying in, she was probably going to find some other happy wanderer to kind of crash with, which we'll circle back to that, I guess, in a minute here. But the second that Franklin brings the drugs in the house, like, Jerome was very quick to shut that down because he knew, of course, like, Jerome's a smart man. He knew that was blood money. He's one of the most wise people in the show, actually. Actually, by the end of it, turns into one of the more tender humans, exception for what happened to Dallas. But hey, that was Uncle. Leave Uncle alone, man. Uncle was tripping. Everybody deserves a bad day once, but we don't talk about what happened with Dallas. But Jerome, he's a smart man. He shuts that stuff down like, hey, we're not doing this type of business. But now Louie, she's a little opportunist. She probably, second she heard the word drugs, she probably had her ear perked up against the door, started eavesdropping. She ends up overhearing their entire conversation between Jerome and Franklin. She just kind of sits in the shadows like a little opportunist. And she eventually makes the connect to her past life as a working girl, with the club she was in and that type of stuff. And she actually ends up getting her pimp to buy the product, which literally ends up throwing Louie in the middle of this entire, I guess, saga, in the middle of all this money that's being made here. But at first, of course, she is kind of convincing herself that she does do this for the love of Franklin and his well-being, which I guess at first it really is, I guess, kind of the case. But you really soon realize that it is a facade, that she only did it in a way to benefit her, to kind of groom Franklin and building him up so that she could be there to collect the legacy that he ends up leaving behind. Can't lie, though, in the first season, Louie is very solid. But at the end of the day, there was a few questions left on the table. And by the end of it, you were even left with only more questions. Now, start of Season 2, a lot of those questions did end up getting answered with her getting a larger role in the story, with, her and Jerome getting in a petty argument because, rightfully so, he didn't trust Shorty with money. And she's like, you know what, you don't want to give me money, so I'm going to leave because of it, which, first off, that's a major red flag right there, that you're breaking up because that's basically like breaking up because you don't want to sign a prenup for marriage. Like, I know I said Jerome was wise earlier, but come on, dude, that's a major red flag in your shorty right there. You got to know when to read that type of stuff. But, she decides to kind of connect Franklin and use that connect. Well, honestly, kind of to sum this up, after she parts ways with Jerome, she goes back to her old pimp, and instead of being one of her working girls, she's getting fucked by her pimp, basically. She's getting railed by her pimp, but you would think that because the whole time that she is under her pimp, she is being a little slimy opportunist with a whole plan in motion, moving piece by piece, slowly but surely, keeping that back door in the back of her head. And when shit gets real and, her and her pimp end up fighting, her plan works, she ends up taking control of the club, and Franklin just gives it to her as kind of a reward for, the victory. And I want to say, I guess they both, her and Franklin, made the plan so they could have a supply and demand at the same time, because, that's just good business at the end of the day. But it has been a couple months since I last seen the show, so I'm a little foggy on some of the portions of it. But I guess that just goes to show, like, hey, she's always got that backdoor activity. Like, that stuff's possible with her, and she has the ability to stay friendly until that moment comes where she does need to backdoor. Even though it is one of her more likable seasons again with season 2 because she is helping Franklin out, you definitely see a lot more of the red flags versus the first season there. Now, by season 3 is where a big shift happens in Louie, where she gets a lot more confident based off that last victory. She tries to make legitimate businesses with Jerome, and after having to deal with, the loose end in the beginning part of the season by having to literally kill her pimp that she took over with the club, it kind of shows a huge character development moment from Louie becoming just like a planner to an actual killer. Now, once the police actually do end up on the case there, instead of lying low, this is another moment where it shows you the type of person Louie is. Instead of lying low, she decides to buck up against the police and literally creates a scheme to discredit the main officer in charge of the investigation, Andre, which is a reoccurring issue in the story. He becomes kind of a nuisance that they have to deal with by the end of the story, or the end of that season 3. She doesn't really like Andre in the fact that he's trying to control her and put her in a corner. At this point of the story, she is very confident, and at this point, a little bit of an ego comes in mind. She is at the point where she can and wants to make decisions herself. Even at times, she literally scales herself up to Franklin that, she doesn't need him and that she'll be able to operate in that type of world without him. Which brings us to, season 4, where Louie, of course, starts planting the seeds of independence and really kind of shows that she can do it. With Franklin being shot at the end of the 3rd season by his shorty. I don't know what it is with these people and their girls, but they can't do it, bro. They can't do it. They're choosing the wrong ones. But Franklin ends up shot by his girl. And at the end of season 3, that makes Louie and Jerome have to step up big and really fill in the shoes while he is in recovery and getting everything back into, healthy-wise shape. But, this really is her kind of first taste of that authority that she has, and off rip you could immediately tell she's intoxicated by it. Nothing much happens at that point after the fact once Franklin returns, because soonly after she ends up getting shot by kind of a mother retaliating against one of Franklin's crew, Leon, and 2 other girls, Black Diamond and Dallas. Yeah, Jerome, you gotta chill. But the way Franklin handled Black Diamond and Dallas kind of shaped the way that Louie kind of perceived Franklin in the end. He ends up paying Black Diamond and Dallas more money than the person that hired them to shoot in the first place, kind of as like a free agent move, like here's some more money, work for us instead. And with Louie, you know, these were the people that shot her. You know, it's at the end of the day, she does end up bucking down and obeying just because she is under Franklin. She doesn't have the ability to say anything against that, but if anything, she actually pours into it a little bit more and feeds into it. But you know, you could tell that she doesn't let that slide, that little act of, hey, these people shot me and now they work for us now. She by season 5, Louie is a low-key resentment towards Franklin of just how he deals with the situation. Like, at a certain point, she feels like she's being used as a pawn in situations, which, you know, is rightfully so. You know, Franklin isn't the best with treating his people as well, but, you know, she feels like a pawn, and with how she handled things when he was literally under, where she had to take full control, like at that moment, she feels like she doesn't need Franklin, and if anything, she wants to get away and get her own independence from him. Now, she even, at this point of the story, has her own business chapter all the way out in Arkansas, Little Rock, I believe. Don't hold me on that. Like I said, it's been a little minute, but I believe it's in Little Rock, and it literally in her mind solidifies a little bit that she is able to run things efficiently on her own. Like in Little Rock, she did not need Franklin, so what would be the difference here? And by the end of the season, she, on her backdoor activity, does convince Jerome to part ways with Franklin and kind of back her up on her own crusade. And of course, Jerome, he follows out of loyalty, but man, that's what I mean, like, with Jerome. Like, that is the realest motherfucker in the show. Like, he knew his bitch was wrong. He knew 100% that she was wrong. And even still, he stood 10 toes with her. That takes a real-ass man to know that your girl is wrong, but still having to stand with them. I mean, hey, it'd probably take even more of a man to tell her that she was wrong, but you knew Louie. She wasn't listening. He tried. She wasn't listening. But, you know, the way that she ended up in the end being able to fully break off from Franklin was because of some backdoor activity. She literally goes to the supplier directly, his supplier, with the CIA. And at that point of the story, the CIA supplier, Teddy and Franklin, they're literally at each other's throats, like, constantly. It's like they're playing a metaphorical, like, chess match for their lives at this point of the story. So, you know, Teddy's reasons for taking in Louie were a little bit personal against Franklin, but even still, you know, he ended up trusting her a little bit more as a professional and decides to sell to her directly, which permanently damages Franklin to the point where he decides, you know, this is my top part of my business. These people contribute a lot. Like, he literally quits the business after the fact, which Teddy ends up taking a little bit personal, you know, steals all his money, which is I guess a different story analysis on kind of their relationship in the future video. But at that point, that literally makes Franklin become the crash out that you see him by the end of the story, and just backdoor everybody, literally. You know, he backdoors a person that got him started with Louie and Jerome by kind of robbing their stash of money, since he didn't have any money since the CIA took it. He was just like, I'm going to take theirs. I guess in his head, he's like, I got them this money. It deserves to be mine, which is a theme that ran in the end with Leon. But that's besides the fact that it just really kind of sucks, because the situation and relationship between Franklin and Jerome, like, it is really solid. They really actually do end up rocking with each other, but at the end of the day, this bitch is really getting in between them. Her ego doesn't even let her realize the effect that Franklin had, which she doesn't. The connections and all that type of such. And in the end, by the end of that season, you know, Franklin, he does sell her out because he gets the upper advantage with all the connections that he does have that she doesn't. And he doesn't do it. You know, he doesn't even want to do it, even if she was a backdooring little snake. And by the end, of course, he comes to his better senses, then feed Louie to the wolves and 6 Jerome on all of them, basically. And of course, that is going to be the situation, spoiler alert, but that's going to be the situation that got my boy Jerome killed. Man, bro, shit is just tragic, bro. He got killed over the woman he loved, yeah, but at the end of the day, the woman he loved wasn't shit, you know? But man, by the end of like the story, when it comes to Louie, she is literally the same exact position that she was kind of before the story even started. Wanted this time, of course, but kind of in that same scenario. She's isolated. She has no opportunity, kind of lost in the sauce. She's literally waiting around in a dark corner, waiting for that next opportunity to pounce at, which pretty much, like as a character in general, sums up Louie as a whole. You know, she sits back and schemes and plots and makes silent moves and waits until that moment is right. And once it is, she pounces like a snake, you know, waiting for that right second to strike a mouse, which is, in my opinion, the reason why her damage is such an impactful damage, because she knows the weakest moment of her opponent to attack. She literally waited for Jerome to leave to hit up Franklin when Franklin had no other options. She waited until she could get in a room with her pimp being all friendly, playing up to her, so that she could kill her. And on a different occasion, she turns a junkie cop into a loyal soldier when he had lost everything because he was that easy to groom in this situation. But this is what she does. This is her specialty right there. She finds the right moment when somebody is at their weakest, and if they have something of value to her, she will pounce at the opportunity the second it pops up. You know, that she's been thinking and setting up sometimes for months behind the scenes, like a chess master kind of patiently waiting and setting up the board until that key piece is finally up for the taking. She is very intelligent. Like, with Louie, she is a very intelligent person, but that's why her ego pushes her to the point that makes her believe that what she was at was more than she destined for at that point. But situation kind of coincides with Walter White a little bit. Like, if she kind of sit tight, kept her mouth shut, did what she was told, continued to kind of work as Franklin's consigliere, kind of everything would have worked out very well, smooth, like a well-oiled machine. But in the end, her pride and her ego not only ruined the machine, but it got the man that she loved killed in the process. But what's your thoughts on Louie? Was she a character where you were conflicted on, or do you think that she got what she deserved in the end? In my opinion, she fully got what she deserved, but kind of like a quick little mental timeout. Just the show is Snowfall. It really is a beautiful written show with one of the most underrated shows in my opinion. It's in my personal top 10 and has a lot of great full circle moments, kind of like this entire character arc of Louie. But kind of like a little quick PSA, you know, I haven't really watched Snowfall in the past couple of months. I think last time I seen it was like 8 or 9 months ago. So some of the details are a little fuzzy. Story might be a little shaky, but I think for the most part they were pretty much on the head there. But yeah, I mean, if you enjoyed this video, be sure you comment, like, and subscribe, because, you know, I'm a little bit of a smaller creator, so anything does help out. But outside of that, this is your creepy Uncle Lester signing out.